I am Mark Fowler. I'm the Nature Initiative Director here at Grace Farms Foundation. And we are really excited to celebrate World Wildlife Day by speaking with and having a discussion with Dr. Anish Andheria. He is one of the leading conservationists from India working throughout the country. He is the president of the Wildlife Conservation Trust, and it is one of the most successful NGOs operating in India. They work in over 160 protected areas and 23 states throughout the country. He is also a carnivore expert and a field scientist and field researcher. He also is an award-winning wildlife photographer, has authored 2 books, and started the Kids for Tigers program, which has reached over a million children a year. This is an incredible opportunity to speak with one of the foremost tiger experts in the world. So I'm very honored to introduce Dr. Anish Andheria. I'll give you a little bit of a backstory about how Anish and I met. We were at the Explorers Club a week before the COVID lockdown in February of 2019, where I hosted him. And I also hosted his colleague, Mary Melnick from USAID. So they were presenting this work as well as the Big Cats Dialogue work, which is all about how preserving big cats, preserving their ecosystems, and also empowering the local communities is a way to save large carnivores and wildlife, as well as empower people and preserve ecosystems. So when I was hosting Anish there, I was blown away by his presentation. And therefore, I'm very honored to host him on World Wildlife Day, which is today. So globally, we're all celebrating World Wildlife Day. And that's also through our partners at UNDP, Tim Scott, who hosts and actually runs World Wildlife Day. So we have an incredible presentation today. And without further ado, I'm very honored to introduce Dr. Anish Andheria, the amazing conservationist and wildlife photographer. Anish, I can't wait to see your presentation. And without further ado, welcome.
Thank you, Mark. And it's a pleasure to be sharing the success of tiger conservation from India with all those who have gathered here to celebrate the World Wildlife Day. Thank you for hosting me. So I'll start straight away with a 30-minute presentation on why conserving tigers is important for India, and why, despite 1.35 billion people, India is able to conserve large mammals, including large carnivores like tigers and lions. So I hope that this presentation throws light on how large carnivores can be conserved in human-dominated landscapes. So I would start by sharing my screen now. Do let me know if as soon as you see it, because I don't want to speak over something else. Can somebody see me?
Yes, it looks great, Anish.
Okay, so the title is Conservation in a Rapidly Transforming Nation. India is, as I said, 1.35 billion people and growing. It is rapidly developing. We are building roads at a pace which is faster than most other nations. There is a huge amount of pressure on land, as you can imagine. Yet, it has nearly 70% of all wild tigers on Earth. And so, to give you a bit of background about India and her natural capital, so that one can understand the difficulties that the government goes through in conserving large landscapes. So India is only about 4% of the world's renewable water. By renewable water, I mean rivers and lakes, which are formed because of dams. It's just 4% of the world, and India has 18% of the world human population. So you can imagine the disparity between the amount of fresh water that is supporting the kind of life that India has, not only wild, but also human. Nearly 20% of our country, to be precise, 21.3% of India is forest cover. So India's forest cover is about 1/5 of its area. And therefore, the GDP, so if you look at if you calculate the ecosystem services that come out of those forests, then you are looking at an amount which is greater than the GDP of Canada. So the value of those forests, and this value mind you, is a gross underestimation of the true value, because we are just looking at the standing forest, the net present value of the forest. But if we extrapolate the forest into the next century, then that amount could be many times more than that. So basically, what I wanted to share here is that India can see that their forests, when you are looking at forest versus development, the value of the forest is sizable compared to the other human dominated development that we talk of. Nearly 600 rivers originate or are fed by tiger bearing forests. This is a photograph from central India. It's a tiger reserve called Panna Tiger Reserve in Madhya Pradesh. And you can see these kind of forests across the country, along the Western Ghats, that's along the western coast of India, along the central India, that is the Satpura range. So India has 5 different important ranges, which is why there is predictability as far as monsoon goes. And because monsoon is predictable, India is able to feed 1.3 billion people. And you can see the direct connection between tiger conservation and water and forests. So 600 rivers either originate from or are fed by tiger bearing forests. And the forests, as I talk, are supporting huge populations of livestock. India probably has the highest number of livestock on earth. Nearly 30% of the fodder needs of these cattle and goats and sheep come from the forested area. You can see the amount of pressure that so many livestock put on existing forests. This photo is from inside a tiger reserve, again in central India. Nearly 40% of India's energy needs, because a lot of our forests are interspersed with villages. To give you a perspective, India has 51 tiger reserves. So these are areas which are earmarked for conserving the tiger. The area within those 51 tiger reserves is about 2.4% of the total area of the country. Within a tiger reserve, it's divided. The tiger reserves are divided into 2, that is the core and the buffer zone. The core is meant to be inviolate, which means the core belongs to the wildlife, which means that's where the breeding populations of animals and plants survive. The buffer zone, as the name suggests, is basically a buffer between human development and wildlife. So it's like a core surrounded by a ring of buffer. So if you look at just the core, then that is about 1.1% of the area of India. And inside core, as I speak, there are 35,000 families. In the buffer zone, which is about 1.3% of the area of the country, that's inside the tiger reserve. So it's part of the tiger reserve. You are looking at 3 million people. So inside India's 51 tiger reserve, we still have 3 million people living. And along the periphery of these tiger reserves, you are looking at close to 100 million people, which means the livelihoods of so many people, and most of these people are doubly marginalized because they are far away from the cities. They don't have the kind of medical facilities that they need. And so you can imagine that they are largely dependent on these forests. And some research has shown that up to 40% of their livelihood needs are met by these existing forests. Yet, India supports 70% of the world's tiger population. Tigers are found in 13 countries on earth. All of these are in Asia. The remaining 12 countries together have only 30% tigers. And the density of people in India is far greater than all the other countries. China is a huge country, yet they had two subspecies of tigers, of which one is extinct. There are 9 subspecies in all, of which 4 are extinct, and there are 5 that still exist, of which the Royal Bengal tiger is what is found in the Indian subcontinent, which means in India, in Nepal, in Bhutan, and in Bangladesh. Now, looking at the protection, if you look at a nation like India, and one would argue, why should you protect wildlife when people don't have enough space to live, or people don't have enough food to eat? The answer is simple, that if you look at the amount of money the government is spending on managing these tiger reserves and compare it with the amount of ecosystem services in terms of pollination, in terms of germination, in terms of temperature regulation, in terms of precipitation, soil formation, and so on and so forth, you are looking at a return of 200 to 530. There is no business on this earth that can give you that kind of profit. But 1 rupee investment, 1 Indian rupees investment is giving you returns of 200 to 530 Indian rupees. India constitutes about 2.4% of the world's land area, but supports 8% of world biodiversity. As you can see, it has about 1,300 species of birds, more than 400 species of mammals, 15 species of wildcats. I don't know of any other country on earth that supports so many different species of cats. And that speaks volumes about the prey, and when you look at these 15 species, the largest of all cats is the tiger. A male tiger in India can weigh nearly 260 to 270 kilograms. And the smallest cat is also found in India. It is called the rusty spotted cat, which is barely a couple of kgs. And so you have a size variation from about 2 to 3 kgs to 270 kgs. And to support cats of varying sizes, you obviously need prey, which is also of varying sizes. And that is possible because of the tropical environment of the country. There are 10 biogeographic zones in the country. And therefore, you have so many different habitat types that support a plethora of mammalian prey species. Looking at plants, you have about 25,000 species of flowering plants and nearly 300 plus species of snakes. And when you look at the issue that the planet is facing from climate change, you can imagine that a country as big and as thickly populated as India is obviously under tremendous stress. We know, and these are some global figures, that in the past 70 years, the world population has tripled, but the demand for water has gone up 6-folds. And according to the Living Planet report, the vertebrate population decline is up to 60%. This is in the last 40 years, nearly 60% of the vertebrate populations have declined. 18 of the last 19 years have been the warmest on record. We already know that if business goes on as usual, we are looking at migration of almost 140 million people by 2030. And look at the subcontinent, you have more than 100 million people living in Bangladesh. Even Sri Lanka is very thickly populated. Because of climate change, because of sea level rise, if we are not able to maintain the kind of forest cover that we have, you may look at mass migrations from many of these countries, and that is going to destabilize the law and order situation that exists in the region, and also make such large number of people highly vulnerable to exploitation. So climate change and forest degradation and extinctions of fauna and flora are all connected, and together they can put huge pressure on the law and order situation across the planet. We are already seeing in several continents the kind of issues that are developing in terms of terrorism and so on and so forth. However, the world is not yet learning, and almost 16 million hectare of tree cover loss has been recorded in 2017. And mind you, this was before the monstrous fires of Australia and Brazil. So this is in 2017, and an area as big as Bangladesh was lost when it comes to forest cover. In the following years, that is 2018, 19, and 20, a much larger area has got degraded. So I told you that India is thickly populated. Obviously, so many people and their aspirations are difficult to meet. This picture is of a gentleman who has cut a patch of forest which belongs to them. This is a community in the northeast part of India. They practice what is called shifting cultivation. So they burn the forest, the ash from the burnt trees enrich the soil. They cultivate crops there for a few years and then move and burn another patch of forest. Now, this kind of cultivation was prevalent all throughout the planet in many of these mountainous areas. But back then, maybe 200-300 years ago, the population sizes were so small that the impact of this on the larger landscape was minuscule. But now the populations have grown in these regions in India. The population has gone up 6 times in the about 150 years. And the kind of pressure that is put on the land because of the age-old practice of shifting cultivation is enormous. There is very high dependence on fuel wood that is on the forest. You can see some of these photos are from the camera traps that are put up by our organization in several forested areas to estimate tiger and leopard densities. We also get many of these pictures which you can see where kgs of wood is going. In fact, in central India, one of our studies has shown that a family of 5 uses about 10 to 12 kgs of wood, either to cook food or to heat water on a daily basis. And you are looking at 3 million people living inside the tiger reserves and 100 million people dependent on the forests. So there is huge pressure in terms of fuel wood on the forest on a daily basis. This I've already told you, nearly 300 million people are dependent on protected areas. India, as I told you, about 5% of our country is well protected because it falls under the protected area network. When I talk of PA, it means national parks, sanctuaries, conservation reserves, and community reserves. So we have about 869 protected areas in India. However, they are very small. If you add the area of all these, it is only about 5% of India. And nearly 300 million people are dependent directly or indirectly on this 5% of India. 65% of Indians are farmers, and nearly 85% of these are subsistence farmers, which means that 85% of all farmers have a land holding which is less than 2 hectares, which means that they are hand to mouth. They cultivate crops to eat. They don't earn by selling the crops. So you are also looking at poverty, and when because of climate change, because of very frequent climate weather, very harsh weather conditions, these farmers are going into a cycle of debt. So it is a zero-sum game for them. Farming becomes damn difficult because monsoon is either failing or it rains too much. India also has the second largest road network on earth. We are building nearly 21 kilometers of 4-lane and 6-lane highways every single day. And that is going to reach 44 kilometers a day within the next 10 years. And at that point, we would have overtaken America in terms of the road network. So the kind of pressure that this galloping development is putting on the forest is enormous in terms of fragmentation. So all these roads, the railway lines, the power lines, and the canals, they are crisscrossing our existing forest areas. They are threatening to fragment the forest further. So at one end, there is degradation because of the dependence of the poor people on fuel wood. There is obviously pressure from large developmental projects like dams, mines, because you need large dams so that the irrigation is good and so that the farmers can grow enough crop. And most of these dams obviously are planned inside the forest. So there is huge amount of submergence. Then you have mining for coal, mining for other essential minerals, and then you have linear infrastructure. So these developmental projects, linear infrastructures, and daily subsistence of people are putting tremendous amount of pressure. I don't want to go in great detail talking about the floods and droughts, the frequency of floods and droughts, like any other place on earth, has gone up. The forest, as I talk to you, we have in the central India a forest called Simlipal Tiger Reserve in a state of Odisha, and that forest is burning since the last 7 days. And so the fires are more frequent. And these are all man-made fires. There are no natural fires in peninsular India. So these are lit by people who are collecting forest produce during this time of the year. In the past, these fires would not spread so much, but because of the depleting moisture, as we all know, every single year is hotter than the previous year now, because of which the soil moisture has gone down, the moisture in the air has gone down, and therefore the fires are much, much more difficult to control. And fires are, they are very, very big injuries. They are far more disastrous to wildlife than poaching. Because the forest is getting degraded, because the forest is getting fragmented, the interface between people and wildlife has gone up. And therefore, because of this interface, there is more number of conflict situations. As a result, you have losses on either side. Several animals are killed when they enter human habitations, or when people go into the forest to collect fuel wood, they get attacked by carnivores or are trampled by elephants. So the conflict situation and the human-wildlife interface has gone up steadily, and this is going to be one of the most difficult things to control as we go forward. The illegal wildlife trade, we all know several countries are suffering. This is the main reason why 12 of the 13 tiger range countries have shown decline in tiger populations. There is a huge market, illegal market for tiger body parts in China, in Vietnam. And that is one of the reasons why there is a big mafia of poachers. I would say India, to a great extent, has been able to curtail this poaching, this organized crime against tigers and elephants and rhinos. And that is the main reason why they are doing well. I'll come to that later. So this is the kind of crisis that the world is facing. These are what I spoke about in the last 5-10 minutes was the reasons why it is so difficult in India to protect. And now I'm going to, in the last lap of my talk, highlight those reasons why, despite all the problems that I've shared with you, both global and local, India has done relatively better than several other neighboring countries when it comes to wildlife conservation. So there is a complete ban on hunting since 1972 because of the Wildlife Protection Act. There is another act, which is the Forest Conservation Act, which was launched in 1980. And as per that act, you cannot convert forest into a non-forest use. If at all a developmental project has to go through a forest, there are committees wherein people from the NGO sector, individuals, and from various other streams are part of those committees. And these projects have to be okayed by those committees. And if there is no other alternative, then the project proponents have to deposit up to 2% of the cost of the project with the forest department, which is used for compensatory afforestation somewhere else. There is obviously conflict. You can see that these are tiger cubs. This picture was taken from a camera trap put up by a forest department in central India. The forest department is well equipped to monitor wildlife. They have been trained now, and so every tiger reserve, the forest guards know how to put camera traps. So whenever there is a hunting of the tigers and the cubs have killed a buffalo which belonged to a villager. So whenever that kill is reported, they come and they put up a camera trap. So when the animals come back to feed from the buffalo, tigers return to their kills till there is enough meat in the kill. The pictures are taken, and so the culprit is identified. And once it is proven that a tiger or a leopard has killed a livestock, and if this is in the buffer zone, not in the core. So if in the core, if you send a cattle or livestock, it is considered as illegal and you cannot get compensation. But if a tiger kills anything in the buffer zone or outside the tiger reserve, then that family is compensated, and that compensation is rapid. And that is also one of the reasons why people still are tolerant to this kind of losses. Remind you, these are very, very poor people. The cattle holdings, mostly, you're looking at about 10 to 15 heads of cattle, which each family. There are some that have large holdings, but on an average, you only are looking at about 5 to 10 to 12 livestock heads. And so one death in that holding could mean a big loss to a poor family. Another very interesting thing that the government has done is that there were villages inside the core, and it was through science we knew that if we want the wildlife populations to be stable, we need to create inviolate spaces where animals can breed. So people living inside the core of tiger reserves were offered handsome monetary benefits, and if they voluntarily wanted to move, they were shifted. So the photo on the left is of a village that was inside the tiger reserve, and the same village was shifted outside. You can see there is electric line, there is a road that has been laid, there is good medical facility, and this new site, so the villagers are shown 3 or 4 sites, and they can choose which site they want to go. They generally choose one which is close to a railway head or a highway or close to a water body. And so every family will get about 1 million Indian rupees. And if you have an adult son or a daughter in the family, they will also get 1 million rupees. So they offer this package. People move only if they want to. Nobody is forced to move out. And another important thing, which despite all this, we are able to save animals, is because Indians intrinsically believe that wildlife is not something outside of them. It is part of their own environment. So we don't think of wilderness as something that we go to. We believe that we live inside, and a human being and a wild animal are equal. And so when you have an elephant that enters a village and tramples a house or injures somebody, you will never hear people complain and say that I want that animal killed. They will blame the government for it, or they may blame something else, or they may blame the person who actually went to the forest. But you rarely see where people say that I want that animal dead. So that cultural difference that India has from most other countries on earth is probably one of the important reasons why wildlife still thrives here. There is huge amount of protection. The frontline forest staff is recruited from the local communities. So there is a buy-in. People who live inside and around the forest are employed to protect the forest. So that therefore they see sense in protecting wildlife. There is huge amount of daily wagers who are employed on a daily basis. Thousands of people are employed to protect, and that is the reason why the people who are benefiting directly from the forest, and therefore they don't look at wildlife as something which is against them. So thousands and thousands of daily wagers earn from the forest. There is a National Board of Wildlife, as I said, and the State Board of Wildlife. So all these developmental projects are, they have to go to these boards for clearance. Unless these boards clear, first it goes to the state and then to the center, you cannot have those developmental projects. Every death of a tiger or a Schedule 1 species is treated as poaching. Even if it is natural, the forest department has to prove that this tiger has died naturally and was not killed by somebody. So that is a very, very important thing, and therefore they have to go and find clues as to how this particular tiger died because of electrocution. You can see those marks. There is every 4 years, India does an all India tiger population estimation exercise. They put camera traps in 350,000 square kilometers of tiger habitat. So India does the most intensive and the most scientific population estimation of tigers and prey every 4 years since 2006. A lot of mitigation structures are being built on the highways that I'm talking about. This particular highway is cutting through the corridor, and you can see the road is elevated now. So the government has spent just on this particular project up to $32 million to build underpasses so that animals can move in. There are several new protected areas that have been declared. And that is the reason why you have 70+% of wild tigers, of all wild tigers in India. 70+% of all wild Asian elephants, 85% of wild great one-horned rhinoceros, and 100% of Asiatic lions. So animals don't lie. This is the currency with which you measure the quality of the forest. And as long as you have these large mammals in the country, you know that something is going right. I'm talking from Bombay, and you have about 45 adult leopards living within the city limits. We have a national park, which is 103 square kilometers, and you have about 25 to 30,000 flamingos coming into the city on every year. So Bombay could, people think of Bombay as the most polluted. Definitely the pollution levels are high, yet it is not such a hostile place for wildlife. Thank you. I would now stop sharing my screen, and I would want Mark to, ask
Anish,
me.
oh my gosh, that was so incredible to see your incredible photographs and to hear about the really exciting and successful work that's happening in India. I mean, one of the things that really stood out to me in your presentation is right now there are under 4,000 tigers. There are around 4,000 tigers worldwide that exist in the wild, and 70% of those are in India. I mean, this is groundbreaking work. And actually, from what I understand, India is where the populations are actually going up. So
Yes.
this work you're doing is incredibly groundbreaking. And also, what I find interesting is, I work with my partner Rod Katabi from the Justice Initiative on wildlife trafficking, and we work in Asia with USAID Asia. We work with UNDP. We work throughout Africa, Asia, and Latin America. But I will say, and in those countries, wildlife trafficking and poaching is one of the largest threats, as well as, which we know regarding all wildlife, is habitat loss. But in India, from your presentation, and I'm really blown away by the fact that since the 80s, hunting of tigers has been banned. That's incredible. And also, the fact that poaching is not the biggest threat. What I'm hearing from you is that it's infrastructure, it's road building. I mean, India is the second largest developing country, the second largest country for roads behind the United States, from what I understand. And what I'm hearing you say is that it's roads, it's trains and railways, and it's the infrastructure that's the largest threat. So if you can tell us, a little bit more about the main threats, as well as, what most people don't know is that regarding all wildlife on the planet, habitat loss is the largest one. I would even say, after the COVID-19 lockdown, that also applies to us. We've seen what happens when our habitat is lost and the massive repercussions we have. So, but regarding the tiger and regarding, the other animals that exist in India, which I'm blown away by the fact that you have leopards, you have snow leopards, you have tigers, you have lions, elephants, and rhinos. I mean, these are the animals that people travel worldwide to Africa and all around the world to try to see. And in India, you have all of them. So if you could just, tell us more about the infrastructure challenges and the biodiversity of India and these incredible large megafauna, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, so see 1,300 species of birds here. And so it's a wintering ground for so many migrants. So a lot of waterfowl comes from Europe, Siberia. You have the Amur falcon that comes, more than 1 million birds passes through the country and goes to South Africa. So what is happening, Mark, in India is that we have nearly 30 states. And some of these states, I would say one third. So one third, that is 10 states, have done exceedingly well, and they have prioritized conservation in a big way. Another 10 states are somewhere midway, and the remaining are the ones where not enough is being done. And those are the areas where animal populations have got depleted. So when you look at India as a whole, and you're looking at populations as a kind of a cumulative population from the entire country, it looks good because the populations have gone up. So I would just quote that about in 2006, India, as per the first scientific camera trapping exercise, we had about 1,411 tigers. In the last 14 years, that population is now nearly 3,000. So definitely the tiger population has doubled. In the same time, obviously leopard population has done well. But most of this increase is from those 10 states. There are tiger reserves in India that don't have tigers. So out of these 51 tiger reserves that we are talking about, there are at least about 10 to 12 tiger reserves which are not performing up to the mark. In fact, some of them have no tigers at all. And so that is the worry now, that the population augmentation is coming from some states, but when you add up all the numbers, it all looks good to an outsider. But within India, we are worried that some of these states, and some of these states that I'm talking about, where the tigers have disappeared, actually have more forests than those states where the tigers are doing well. So, you know, it's a funny thing.
The challenges continue, is what I'm hearing you say. Is that
and because they are underdeveloped, most of the infrastructure is going to be built in those areas. So the recovery of tigers in those states which are not doing well despite having forests is going to be damn difficult, because that's where the roads are going to come, that's where the mines are going to come. And so within the country, we are happy that the populations are stable or going up, but we are also fearing that we need to really improve the situation in some of these states. And infrastructure, definitely, currently, we have a national guideline for linear infrastructure, which means there is Wildlife Institute of India, which is the government institute, which is a research wing of the government, and they have come up with a guideline which talks about what kind of mitigation structures you have to build on railways, roads, and canals if they are cutting through the forests.
so? Go ahead. Sorry.
One more thing, which is important, is that while I speak about the victories, a lot of them have come because of the courts. So some of the state governments have not respected the sanctity of the forests. And so the non-governmental organizations and individuals have filed litigations, and eventually the court has turned the directive in the favor of wildlife. So I think courts also are playing a big role. And so I think while we should definitely pat our backs for what has happened in the last 15 years, but we are far away from a satisfactory position. If you ask me, we are way behind when it comes to marine life. Not much is being done, and India is surrounded by sea on three sides. Very little work, very little research has gone in on the marine ecosystems as well. So that's where we are lagging behind, and we need to step up our efforts in that direction as well.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing that, because you're right. The challenges very much exist, and we have a lot of work to do. Like you said, we have tons of large population growth, and in India, I mean, what does give me hope is that you all, despite very large population growth, you actually have still made progress. That's exciting. And then what I understand is you worked with Mary Melnick and USAID on the infrastructure overpasses. And infrastructure to some may sound bland, but the reality is it's for tigers in India, it's one of the largest threats. So you've done some very innovative work with USAID to create overpasses. Can you just tell us briefly about that?
So when we do all India tiger estimation, camera traps are put, as I said, in 350,000 square kilometers of tiger habitat. And so they are capturing wildlife. So we know in certain areas, the populations are not as good as the other. And we know which are the highways which are going to be widened. And many a times the forest department actually comes to us and says that we know that a particular road or a railway is going to be widened. And so can you come in and put up some cameras so that we know which are those areas? See, what happens is when you don't have information And if a road is cutting through the forest, you normally go by the precautionary principle, and you would say take the entire road above, so that there is a underpass. But that's economically not viable. One has to understand that a country also needs to develop. We need medical facilities to reach everywhere. We need, livelihood issues. So there are education, all these things. So this country has to develop. But while it develops, if we have good data sets, then we can exactly pinpoint the areas where mitigation structures will yield good results, rather than having a blanket elevated road. So those kind of things are happening at multiple. In fact, I would quote one of the states that I'm talking about is our state in Maharashtra. There is a road which is 700 kilometers long. It is it's an expressway. The average speed on that road is likely to be between 125 to 150 kilometers an hour. On that road, they have built 700 mitigation structures for wildlife. Some of those are overpasses, which means that the road is going from below, and from the top, there will be landscaped overpass where it will look like the terrain around it, which will allow animals to go. And what is very good there is that those areas are not well known for tigers. So they are building those overpasses for antelope. So there are black bucks, there are Indian gazelles, there are wolves, there are sloth bears. So even for animals which don't enjoy the same status as the tiger, mitigation structures are being given. So that is really a greenfield road, and I think that will open up an opportunity to push those kind of greenfield roads across the country. One state has done it, other states will have to follow. And so that is where we are focusing. We are trying to collect as much data as we can, so that we can either inform the government that the particular road or a railway needs to circumvent the forest. So sometimes just giving mitigation measures is not enough, because once you do that, what happens is then people say, okay, then let's build roads throughout. Like we talk of Amazon. There was an interesting documentary on how a single road has led to degradation of thousands of hectares of rainforests. So with the road is like cancer. When it goes in, it starts damaging the forest on both sides. So the best option is to circumvent the forest. But wherever, if you're looking at a corridor, normally corridors are areas which are connecting two protected areas. It's impossible to move a road. If you move a road, it will still cut the corridor somewhere. And so in that kind of a situation where you don't have another option is where mitigation structures should come. But no new road should pass through the existing protected area. So we are going one step further, and I'm happy to say some of these states and the forest department are taking great measures to avoid further fragmentation of our landscapes.
That's amazing, Dr. Anish. I will say, that's in the US, we don't have those advanced overpasses for wildlife. So that's very cutting edge. And I'm really glad that that's leading to the conservation of all wildlife in India. I'd like to touch on the wildlife trafficking issue, because my partner Rod Katabi and I are working in Asia, in Africa, and not many people know that big cat wildlife trafficking has spurred a whole industry. And I mean, luckily, India is less of an issue, but I'd love to, just talk to you a little bit about what your thoughts are, because I know that there was such high demand from China, for instance, and some of the Southeast Asian countries, that tigers were disappearing to where the numbers were so low that then the demand switched to lions. And now in Africa, lions are in trouble. And then that demand has also switched to jaguars and leopards. So this demand that from wildlife trafficking is leading to, all the big cats being in trouble. What are your thoughts on this? And so what are you in India doing to combat the poaching and the wildlife trafficking, as well as one of the questions we have from an audience member is, do you do cross-border collaboration with the countries around you, and how does that do? Because that's what we specialize in here at Grace Farms Foundation.
I think you have hit the nail on the head. So if you keep looking at one species, you may feel that species is out of danger. But as we all know, wildlife trafficking is the fourth largest illegal trade on earth, after ammunition, drug, and human trafficking. And so there is huge demand. Plus, wildlife trafficking goes hand in hand with ammunition and drug exchange. So it is also fueling terrorism in a lot of these countries. So if somehow we can curb all kinds of illegal trade in or live animals, because there is huge amount of demand for pets in the pet world, um, and obviously poaching. So poaching of large mammals, definitely from the numbers we know, has gone down, but the threat has not gone away. Which means if the forest, so there are several tiger reserves that don't have tigers, right? So they were called tiger reserves 20 years ago because there were tigers there. Today we don't have them, which means they have been taken away. So if the stress on protection goes down, which means if the protection huts, if the anti-poaching camps that are being laid by the forest department, they don't do the duty that they're doing right now, tigers can go in no time. Because India, the population of these tigers is, they are all distributed in small islands of forests. And so you don't have these 3,000 tigers in one landscape. So you normally have about 60, 70 to 80 tigers in a large size tiger reserves. Most of our tiger reserves don't even have 20 breeding tigresses. So research has shown that for a population to be stable over a long period of time, you need at least 20 breeding females. Only then that population can withstand some amount of poaching and forest degradation. But most of our parks are small. And so you need to look at corridors. And when you look at corridors, animals are going to move out of that protected area into an area which is not well protected and which is also human dominated. So when you have a network of corridors between these protected areas, the animals that move out are going to be vulnerable. So that is where poaching is still happening. And as you said it correctly, leopards are being hammered, and we are losing large number of leopards. I would say a leopard a day easily in the country. A lot of them, and I would say the maximum number of deaths of leopards is happening because of road network. And the second most is poaching. So poaching networks have shifted from tigers to leopards and to pangolin. So pangolin is also something that has hit the market. It is probably the most trafficked wild mammal on earth. In India, our organization is currently tracking 4 pangolins. We have fitted radio tags on them, and that is giving us good information. But that is the first time we had predicted and we thought of them behaving a certain way, but everything that we knew about them, it was actually turned on its head from the data that is coming. So definitely illegal wildlife trade is a big, big threat, and it exists. It is existing in a different form now. A lot of marine species, seahorses, whale sharks, a lot of species of sharks, they are going. A lot of ornamental fish are going from our seas near Andamans, near Lakshadweep. These are all islands. And there is huge amount of pressure on these kind of fish and certain things. So I think India needs to step up. I can't say that we know everything about this. We are still miles behind the kind of poaching pressure that we have on other species. Tigers we have sorted, more or less. But as I said, pressure will remain. So we need to keep up. And then, so therefore, what the government is doing now is to start looking at the customs, all our ports, airports, docks, and we need to still strengthen those different agencies, because those are the areas from where things are going out. So
that's exactly what we do at Grace Farms is work. So, and I look forward to working with you on this at Grace Farms Foundation. We actually work on collaborating with all the law enforcement within the country, and then facilitating collaboration on the borders. Because like you know, yeah, these organized criminals, these organized crime syndicates, they actually like the borders because that stops government collaboration. Well, we actually work very hard. So I'm looking forward to working with you and USAID, for instance, and US government law enforcement. Not many people know that Homeland Security and investigations and many organizations, we work overseas with INL and all these different groups to actually export knowledge and collaboration of how to take down criminal syndicates. And that's who runs, as you said, this is the fourth largest, wildlife trafficking is the fourth largest organized crime in the world. And luckily, Rod Katabi and I and law enforcement were working with people like yourself to actually facilitate collaboration. So this is really exciting.
And the Global Tiger Forum,
Yes.
where all the 13 countries are members, and the National Tiger Conservation Authority, together, they have already had several bilateral meetings with India, Bhutan, India, Bangladesh, and India, Nepal. They have also gone and trained several other tiger-bearing countries because India has been successful through the connections and through the Global Tiger Forum. Indian scientists have been invited to several other tiger range countries to help improve their monitoring. Because first thing is to understand what we have. So most countries don't even have an like you have an all India tiger estimation program. You don't have it there. So that is a starting point. If you don't know what your bank balance is, you don't know how much is getting pilfered. So India is helping, and I think Global Tiger Forum and NTCA together, they are doing good work in terms of trans-border dialogues.
That's wonderful. And yes, we're going to learn more with about the Global Tiger Forum and the Snow Leopard Conservancy through the Big Cat dialogues of which you're a part of. So I'm very excited to continue that work with USAID and UNDP. We've had a number of questions, and I'm grateful to the audience for being a part of this. We're going to ask a few questions. I see one here. What would you say the impact of COVID-19 has been on India and the tiger numbers holding steady? Are they holding steady? This is from Mary Melnick from USAID, our partner. What would you say COVID-19 has done, and where do you see us going from here?
So COVID-19, we were fearing that COVID-19 and the restrictions, and because of the reverse migration of a lot of people from the city back into the rural area will put pressure on wildlife. I must give full credit to our forest departments, because the forest department never went on a holiday. So not for a single day did a forest guard stop carrying out his or her duty, because of which at least the protected areas, which are the areas where you have anti-poaching camps, they have held their own. There have been incidents of prey poaching. Definitely the number of prey poaching incidences have gone up because people who have returned back to their villages, obviously without jobs, they have gone in, and the bush meat consumption definitely has gone up. But I have been traveling since October, and pretty much wildlife still exists, which means that the damage is not massive. And I think because we have a good network of protected areas and corridors, wherever there is slight depletion, that will get covered or it will rebuild itself if once we start moving on with our lives. But definitely, I think a huge amount of credit goes to the forest department for continuing to protect these parks. I was really worried during that time, but none of these people have gone. In fact, some of these progressive states have appointed the people who are involved in tourism. So the drivers and the guides who take tourists inside for tiger safaris, obviously they were out of jobs. So they in fact called them in, and they made them do certain duties so that they can earn from some protection activity or some other forest related activities. So they have found innovative ways. So COVID-19 has not had a big dent on wildlife, at least the terrestrial wildlife.
Okay, that's good to hear. And as we all know, that it's actually theorized that COVID-19 may have come from pangolins. It may have come from trafficking of bats and pangolins and bushmeat. So, the work you're doing to preserve forests, to preserve large carnivores, as well as the prey species, is so important, because if we stop exploiting deep within the jungles, we can actually avoid the zoonotic diseases. And if we stop, bush meat trade and wildlife trafficking trade, we could actually avoid these zoonotic diseases. So your work is so imperative and so important.
Okay, so then I think Mark was wanting me to share some photos from that I have taken so that people can see the beauty of the country. And so here it is. I will take another 5 minutes maximum to take you through some of the photos that I've captured on my camera over the last 25 years or more, I think 30 years or so. So I'll share my screen now. This is evergreen forest loaded with great hornbills, the king cobra, tigers, elephants, gaur. This is Manas Tiger Reserve, which is bordering Bhutan. So you have Great Manas National Park in Bhutan and the Manas Tiger Reserve in India. It's contiguous. This is the Manas River, and everything to the left of the river is Bhutan. I am standing in the India side. This is in Kashmir, very close to Srinagar. This is the Dachigam National Park, where one of the rarest deers, the Hangul deer, which is a close relative of the red-tailed deer that's found in Europe, is found there. This is another forest down south called Kaveri Tiger Reserve, named after the river. Every evening is spectacular there. The grasslands, India also has a lot of grasslands. This is in the central Indian landscape. This place also has a lot of black bucks. This is me sitting in one of our central Indian forests called Satpura Tiger Reserve. This is Pench. You can look at the early morning mist rising. This is again a evergreen forest in the Western Ghats. This is this borders Nepal. This is the Dudhwa Tiger Reserve. It is contiguous with forests of Nepal. Another forest. These are vistas. This is again evergreen forest of the south. This is the easternmost part of India, just 10 kilometers from where this photo is taken. It's China border. And so this is the easternmost part of the Arunachal Pradesh area, extremely beautiful in the Himalayas. Again, central Western Ghats, evening, sunset. This is in the western part of India called Ranthambore Tiger Reserve. Evening, it looks like the green lights that you see in Alaska. This is the Central Indian Forest. It's deciduous. It looks lifeless, but this supports a very, very good quality tiger population. This river that passes through this park is why it's called the Ken River. Extensive forest. This is again another place. You can see the forest guards protecting our forests. Termite mounds, massive. This is the frontline forest staff that walks into the forest almost every day, what we call M stripes. Every guard is logging his daily track on a GPS, so we know exactly where they walked, how much they walked, and it is calculated, and the field director looks at all that data every 15 days. Obviously, look at the tiger. This is the tail of a chameleon, silk cotton. Wildlife of all types. Crested serpent eagle enjoying the first rain. This is a reef heron about to fish. You can see that it has caught a fish successfully. Great horned owl, a young great horned owl chick. Then you have the merlin that migrates into India during winter. This was photographed in the Little Run of Kutch in Gujarat. Skimmers, ospreys coming in from Europe. Snakes, I told you 300 species of snakes. This is the wine snake. This is again endemic to India. This is the Malabar giant squirrel. You have 7 different races of the Malabar giant squirrel. This is the desert fox. It is a different race of the red fox that you have in Europe. Leopard, one of the most gorgeous cats, and one of my favorite animals. It's a young male tiger. This is a tigress marking her territory. You can see she is urinating on a flag post. Tigers, being tigers. Look at that evening light.
Wow.
And this is one of my favorite photos where a tiger was rescued from a village and then released back into Sundarbans. So that's it. Thank you, Mark.
Wow. Dr. Anish Andheria, those were incredible photos. and I'm so grateful to have shared this presentation with you, because I've learned much more about India and about the tiger situations in India than ever before. But I will tell you something, just a little aside. I have two nieces and a nephew who also are part Indian, or we have family in India. So I'm going to come and visit, and I'm going to go on safari with you on a photographic safari, because I'll tell you something, there's nothing, India has such potential to be the #1 safari and photographic sustainable wildlife, viewing place in the world. It's an incredible country. The people are amazing, and we can't wait to come see you and to work with you and USAID and our partners, our Grace Farms Foundation partners, to make positive change. So with that, we've got a ton of audience questions, but unfortunately we've had such a great time that we don't have time to answer them. What we will do is we will send answers to the respond to the questions. But thank you so much. I know it's midnight your time, or 1 a.m. at this point, but we're so grateful for your presentation, and I can't wait to see you soon, Anish.
Thank you, Mark. Hello to Mary if she's around, and my friends from USAID. And Mark, fantastic to actually interact with people like we did I think on the same day last year we were together. Yes. So it's you're reliving that moment, but that is so much more fun when you are actually in the same room with people. And don't forget to give my regards and a big hug to Mom. She was there, and I remember spending some good time with her.
Well, my mother, Betsy Fowler, is a wild woman in her own right, probably more wild than my father was, Jim Fowler. But thank you, Anish. And it's a family. This is a family, friendly project, and I'm so glad and I'm so grateful. So thank you, and we at Grace Farms look forward to collaborating with you, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, everybody at the Grace Farms and people who attended this. See you. Bye.